Welcome to Lead Pods, the official leadership podcast from USMB for pastors and church leaders, where our goal is to increase our impact together.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to this week's episode of the USMB Lead Pods. My name is Matt Erzman, and I'm grateful to be your host today. And you guys, we made it. Today is episode 50. We've done 50 of these shows, which is kind of hard for me to believe. But I'm really grateful for all of you listening today and for those of you who have been with us along the way so far. Got a great episode today. I'm excited to be talking with Bob Davis. Many of you might know Bob from his years with Multiply as a missionary. He recently is switching roles, and he's still involved with Multiply very heavily, but he's officially on board with ICOM now, the International Community of Mennonite Brethren. I think his title is U.S. Advocate, and so we dive into what that means. And I think it was just a good conversation, a good reminder for all of us of how our local churches and even us as individuals can have an impact around the world with Mennonite brethren, brothers and sisters around the world. So really cool conversation. I think you'll enjoy hearing about Bob's new role in some ways that maybe your church can get involved with MB efforts around the world. So again, thank you so much for listening. Let's take a quick break and then we'll get right to my conversation with Bob Davis.
Today's podcast is sponsored by Mennonite Central Committee. Around the world, MCC supports local church initiatives, responding together to disasters and providing relief, development, and peace building in the name of Christ. MCC has worked with Mennonite Brethren churches to provide latrines and water catchment systems, support for schools and food, shelter, hygiene supplies, and trauma training for displaced people. MCC and the MB Church are together in mission. Learn more at mcc.org.
All right, my friends. Well, today I'm excited to have an old friend. Bob Davis is joining us today. And Bob, many of you might know Bob as an MB Multiply missionary, which he still is, but he's also got kind of a new role that we're going to dive into today. So, Bob, grateful for you spending some time with us. Thanks for being here.
I am really happy to be here. This is fun. I am going to enjoy talking about ICOM and catching folks up with what's going on with my new role.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm excited to dive into that as well. So we'll get to ICOM in your new role, but just in case people don't know you or don't really know your story, you've been kind of all over the world. Kind of Asia was kind of your focus for a while. Why don't you give us a quick background? What kind of led you to where you are today? What's your Multiply MB mission story?
Yeah. Thanks, Matt. I came to the MB world in about 2000. We had spent 10 years church planting in England with a Baptist mission organization for the first 5, and then sort of as independent missionaries the second 5. And then when we came back, that was when we got introduced to Mennonite Brethren Church in Birch Bay, Washington. That's where we lived. My wife is originally from Washington State. So we kind of got connected to the MB Church. I eventually became staff at the MB Church, went to the MB Seminary in Langley, British Columbia, and did a master's degree. And towards the end of that time, we just kind of felt God's call back towards cross-cultural ministry, which is something that we had obviously said yes to earlier in our lives. And so God directed our steps to Thailand. And we went to Thailand with MBMSI, it was then, and then MB Mission, and now Multiply. We went out to Thailand in 2007, and we were there for about 8.5 years. And got pretty deeply connected with the Thai and Laotian churches there, and the other missionaries, of course, and the ministries going on there. Came back, felt God's call to come back and relocate back in the States in 2015, and moved back into the same area where we had gone from, back to the same home church. And really kind of thinking that, we made a 10-year commitment to Multiply. Kind of felt like maybe we were coming to the end of that. And that would have been 2016. But then Multiply has asked us to kind of stick around, and just had various roles. I was part of the mobilization team for a while, part of the kind of training team for a while, wore multiple hats, and but continued to stay connected to Southeast Asia. And then eventually was asked to be the regional leader for Southeast Asia. And then now I'm a regional leader. We split the region. And so Louise Sinclair Peters is the regional leader for part of Thailand and Myanmar. And I do the north of Thailand and the rest of Southeast Asia and East Asia. So continue to be with Multiply. But then a few years ago, while I was missionary in Thailand is when I first became aware of ICOM,
Mm-hmm.
and kind of saw it from the mission side of things, where we
Before we
had
get too deep here, Bob, let's define ICOM if people don't know what
yeah,
ICOM
of
is.
course, yeah. ICOM stands for the International Community of Mennonite Brethren. So ICOM exists basically to be a place where national Mennonite Brethren churches and conferences of churches can connect with one another. Okay. So 22 conferences in 20 different countries currently, with about a dozen or so what we call emerging conferences, which are smaller families of churches or networks of churches that are kind of on the pathway to becoming full members in ICOM. So some of those emerging conferences are in Southeast Asia. Thailand is on the pathway. Myanmar is on the pathway. The Philippines is on the pathway. So that became my introduction. And of course, our ministry in amongst the Khmer people in Laos, that also is currently already a member country of national conference member of ICOM. So I was privileged to be able to go to some of the ICOM summits. ICOM has an annual summit somewhere in the world where they bring together what they call delegates from the various member conferences. And so it's kind of like, a big event where there's a lot of sharing and connecting and networking that goes on. So I was able to go to several of those as a translator for the Laotian leader. And so that was my exposure to ICOM. I saw it from the mission side. I saw what a benefit being part of something bigger than Multiply, because Multiply is a mission agency based in North America. ICOM is all of the national conferences all around the world of, like India and Congo and Asia and South America and Europe, as well as North America. So it's just it's a bigger idea, and it's much more based around relationship. Multiply, obviously relationship is a huge thing for mission, but Multiply is really kind of more focused on projects, church planting projects, leadership training projects, even some holistic community development projects in order to have opportunity to preach the gospel. So those are all fantastic, but they're just that one piece, right? They're that one element. But ICOM is really more about how those churches that are planted, that grow into families of churches in nations, connect to the global Mennonite Brethren family. Okay. So that's if I could maybe identify a difference between Multiply and ICOM. Multiply is the mission agency based in North America, but ICOM is the family. ICOM is what those churches that are planted join eventually when they become, kind of a family of churches in a particular nation. So I was always a big fan of ICOM. I've always felt like it's an amazing thing. So coming back to North America, being a regional leader for Southeast and East Asia, going back and forth, making trips back and forth, and at the same time kind of walking with those national churches and their leaders toward full engagement or membership in the ICOM family, in the larger Mennonite Brethren family. That's just given me a deep appreciation for it. So that's kind of my story and how I got to the place where I'm at now in this particular role they've invited me into.
And I want to dive into your role because I know you're doing some really interesting and cool things specifically in this new role. Before we get too far there, I'd just like to hear more about, so when you're attending one of these ICOM conferences or just working with ICOM churches around the world, I mean, I know some of this might be kind of easy, but like what are some of the benefits that you see of us interacting as a one kind of worldwide family? Like, obviously it's just good to network and it's good for us to just communicate, whatever, but like, just tell me more about why you see so much benefit in all this, all of us working together, being one worldwide family.
Yeah, I think probably the short answer to that is we have so much to learn from each other. Mm-hmm. Like we need each other so desperately. And the things that we find that one particular culture or nation or conference of churches is strong in, another church conference of churches might be weak in, and vice versa. Yeah, just seeing how these churches can help one another and learn from one another and benefit. That's a huge part. That's what family does, right?
Yeah.
We recognize that in the family we have generations. In the family we have people who have particular skills and abilities, particular perspectives that can be, really challenging to us as well as really helpful to us. So
Mm-hmm.
learning from one another. We say that ICOM exists for three things. It exists to connect, strengthen, and expand its member churches. So
Okay.
connecting, strengthening, and expanding. The connecting part is relational, just getting to know
Mm-hmm.
one another and understand the context. What I found, again, in my own personal experience is, for example, when the Asian churches, the Southeast Asian churches, began to interact with the churches in places like Africa, it was their first realization that they were not the only poor people on the planet, really.
Yeah.
People trying to live for God in challenging circumstances, and sometimes those circumstances are political, like in the case of countries where we have regimes or governments that are not favorable towards Christianity. Sometimes they're economic, sometimes they're cultural animism. Like the amazing thing is when you introduce animistic people from South America to animistic people from Southeast Asia, they immediately have something in common. They have a
Yeah.
common worldview, even though they're from opposite sides of the world.
Yep.
They have this thing that they share in common. And you could say the same thing about Muslims and Buddhists and Hindus and atheists and whatever. When they come to realize that their little cluster of churches, or even their little house church, is not the only one that has that belief and faces those challenges, that just becomes a huge encouragement. So connecting,
Yep.
and just so much to learn from each other. And I think most people who have any kind of cross-cultural mission experience, going on a mission trip or whatever, they will resonate with that they went there to be a blessing, but they were so blessed. We hear that over and over again in the world of mission, that people go to serve and then they come back just transformed. Well, just imagine that, like magnified by 1,000, because now it's not just a mission trip, it's actually a family relationship that is ongoing and not just kind of a temporary thing that you do for 2 weeks and then go back to your normal life.
Right. Yeah. Whenever I travel overseas, I'm always amazed. I mean, it sounds like contradictory a little bit, but I'm always amazed at how big the world is and how small the world is.
Yeah.
Like, I think, especially in North America, we kind of tend to think that we are the most important people in the world. That's probably our downfall, is we're pretty stubborn people who think that we're really good at everything. But when you travel around the world, you see just the strength and the beauty and just the awesome things happening around the world. There's so much bigger than what's going on in our little neighborhood. And I'm always amazed that people on the other side of the world are just like me. Like, we have to honor the differences and be aware of the differences, of course. But like, people are people, and we have the same struggles, same delights, same loves. Like, it's just, I'm always struck by the bigness and the smallness of the world whenever I travel.
Yeah, it's a great observation. This is that there's this thing we call the human condition.
Yeah,
And
right.
it doesn't, like we face, even though context is much different and culture is much different, there are commonalities in the human experience. It's like when we read the Bible, it's the same thing, right? We read about the apostles of Jesus and the disciples of Jesus asking questions and being confused and not understanding and not having enough faith. And we go, oh, I can identify with that,
Right.
even though it's thousands of years ago, completely different cultural context. It doesn't matter, because those are human commonalities. We all face similar things in our humanity, even though our social context and the day in which we live is completely different.
Yep.
So yeah, I think that connecting piece is huge, just the relation, what we can learn from one another. The other thing we talk about, connecting, and then the second one was strengthening, and just the idea that one of the things that we are good at in the West is it's training. Like, we have access to so much education and programs and just all kinds of things that are really helpful for the global church, because in a lot of places in the world, they don't have access to that kind of thing. So creating training programs is one of the best things that we in the West can contribute to the global church. Yep. They've got things that they can give to us that we desperately need. Their stories of courage and faith in face of opposition. Most of us in North America don't know what persecution looks like.
Right.
But when we hang out with people who live on, like their expectation is not that the government's going to fix all their problems because the government's against them. And
Right.
all of a sudden we're like, oh, okay, we can learn something from these people who've never lived under favorable circumstances when it comes to the political system. So strengthening one another, bringing what we can. It's almost like a sanctified potluck, right? Like
Yeah.
where, what are you bringing to the table? And what we bring, like you said, Matt, sometimes our perception of what we bring is that it's the most important thing.
Right.
We've got education and we've got money and we've got resources and we've got technology. But then you think about what those churches are bringing, like faith, hope, and love, right? I mean, they're bringing, like courage in the face of opposition and to dependence upon God and relying on closeness to the Holy Spirit and exuberance in worship, freedom in worship. Those are things that we actually lack. And so we bring the stuff that we can, and then we realize pretty quickly that the stuff that they're bringing is actually kingdom stuff.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the stuff we're bringing, it's important and it's valuable, but it kind of pales in comparison when you think about the things that Jesus said are the most important things in the kingdom.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? It's not a slam on the Western church. It's just an honest recognition that the value, the things that we value the highest are not always the things that are most valuable in God's kingdom. Yep. They can be things that we value in our culture. But when we get around people who don't have those things, but they have other things, that's when sometimes our worldview is challenged to say, wait a minute, I've never known what it's like to live under oppression and still rejoice in Jesus and not be discouraged and not fail. But to continue to be used by God for his kingdom.
Yeah, it's just so clear to me that we have so much to learn from each other. Like it's a 360 relationship, right? And my understanding is it's kind of what your new role is kind of focused on, right? So I think your new role with ICOM is advocate, or you can kind of fill us in on that. Or my understanding is you're kind of not, quote unquote, on the field in Thailand quite as much, but you're shifting your focus to kind of help U.S. churches take advantage of some of this stuff. Can you tell us about what your new role is?
Yeah. So that's great. So just a little bit of background, I think might be helpful. About 2 years ago, a task force was put together, and it was led by Ed Boschman, who many people will know, who's been part of the ICOM story as well. He serves on the executive of ICOM as well as a representative to the USMB conference. And so, Ed put together a task force with the recognition that the knowledge, the awareness of what ICOM is and does in the U.S. is pretty minimal, pretty soft footprint, to put it that way. Okay. So there was just this sense that, like, what can we do to actually get people more aware, which will then lead to them being more engaged. But it starts really with just awareness, like what is ICOM and what does it do and why, and then you can start to talk about how to get more connected. So Ed put together this task force. The task force was made up of people from across, the U.S., some pastors and some other people who were, just engaged in ministry in various ways in the U.S., had served in different capacities. And so they began to talk about what was needed. And one of the things that they identified was that there really needs to be somebody who's focused on this, like an actual position, a role of somebody who's doing this, maybe part-time, possibly full-time. Okay. So at the same time as they were coming to this conclusion that they need somebody, I was sensing, kind of a stirring in my spirit. As I said earlier, we had kind of split the region of Southeast Asia, and I'd given away a lot of my work, right? I mean, another person was now doing a lot of, and so I was thinking to myself, is this the time to retire? Not quite retirement age. I'm 61, soon to be 62. So is this time for me to retire, or do I step back, or do I step up? Was kind of the question that I felt like the Holy Spirit was asking me. Okay. And this thing about ICOM came to my mind, and I didn't know that this task force existed and was working on this thing and had come to this conclusion that they needed somebody. But at the same time, God was stirring in me to kind of make myself available to ICOM, as well as continuing to be a regional leader, kind of a resource for Asia, East Asia and Southeast Asia. because that's not full time. Like I live in the U.S., I can travel back and forth. I just got back from Thailand last week.
Okay.
For the first time in 2 years. I got to go there for
Oh,
a few
wow.
weeks and
Okay.
connect, so I can still do that, go back and forth. And of course, with technology, with Zoom and, other opportunities to connect with national leaders in those places, it's not as necessary for me to live over there. I can kind of do it from here. But that meant that I had more time when I'm in the States. I'm available. So I approached some of the ICOM people that I know, and I just said, hey, I don't know what's going on with ICOM, but if there's a need for somebody to kind of fill this role or something like it, I wasn't, saying it has to be this job, but then that's when I found out that the task force had already identified a need that was very much in line with what I felt like the Lord was saying to me. So we just began to process that, and we felt like it was really important to get all of the agencies, the leaders of the various agencies, right? So by agency, I'm talking about the USMB conference leadership, the leadership board, the ICOM executive board, and Multiply, because I am still with Multiply, so they need to sign off on this new role. ICOM needs to be happy with the fact that I'm the person who's going to be representing them in the U.S. And the USMB needs to have a voice in saying, yes, we want, first of all, a person. And second of all, if you guys think it should be Bob's great with us. So we worked that through. A proposal was drafted describing what the role would be, and that I was willing to step into the role, and it was accepted by all of these various people. So I'm really just kind of at the beginning, getting started. And so my first sort of official event as the ICOM advocate in the U.S. was the PDC, the Pacific District Conference convention in Arizona in November. So I was there along with Ed Boschman, and we shared, what's going on with ICOM a little bit there. And since then, I've just been connecting with the district ministers. We went from a task force to what we're calling the USMB ICOM team, the US ICOM team. And we've added some people to that to represent. So we have a Congolese pastor and an Ethiopian pastor and Hispanic leader, and from all of the districts are represented, and a lot of so it's kind of like a mini ICOM. We've kind of created this little team that includes some of our diaspora or immigrant churches leadership, because that's what ICOM is, right? So we're just beginning. We've only had one meeting as a new team. We're having brochures printed. I'm working on some media stuff. We're going to have some videos made. So again, the purpose of all of this, my role and the team's role is really at this stage raising the awareness of what ICOM is and what it does. What is the International Community of Mennonite Brethren? Why does it exist? What does it do? And then from there, looking at ways that we can actually facilitate stronger relationships. And so, that's where we're headed with it.
Yeah, cool. So I imagine this is probably the next step of your job. You may not be there yet, and that's okay if you're not. But so if most people listening we have a lot of pastors. We also have just a lot of kind of lay church leaders. So if their church, has a vague awareness of ICOM, and they probably support missionaries, and maybe they send teams every once in a while, but if they're not very actively involved, they kind of know just the basics. What is the next level of engagement? Because I'm guessing most MB churches at least are aware of Multiply and some of the worldwide stuff, but maybe not kind of that next level that you're kind of trying to get to. So what's kind of the step 2 after they're aware of it? What's next?
Yeah. So I would say even at the awareness, like still step 1 at the awareness part, like go to the website, icom.org, and just navigate the website. Just check it out. There's stories on there. There's opportunities to engage in prayer. We're creating some Nations Praying for Nations sort of Zoom prayer meetings. We've already had a bunch of those, or we're scheduling. Currently, there are none scheduled on the website, but we're scheduling more. And the idea is just to get people praying for each other in various places around the world. So start with the website. You can sign up to receive the ICOM newsletter, which goes out in multiple languages, but obviously most people here would choose English for their language. So there's updates that are coming out. So that's kind of at the level of just raising awareness so that people know what it is and what's going on. The other thing is, obviously I'm available when I'm not traveling in Southeast Asia. My schedule is to visit churches and conferences and pastors events and, gatherings of MB leaders and MB church members. So yeah, come and say hi to me and ask for a brochure. We've got brochures printed. And if the churches are interested, I'm available to visit churches. And so my schedule is, currently I'm going to be in the Midwest in some churches this month. I'll be back out there again in April. I'll be in the PDC for some events in April as well. In May, our summit this year, first time in person in a number of years, our ICOM summit is in Brazil, where it all started in 1988. That's where ICOM was actually founded. We're going back there for a huge celebration in May. But I would just say, be aware, be praying for us, go to the website, get signed up to receive more information, and then, reach out to me. My email address is still the Multiply email address, bobd@multiply.net. So you can email me. You can come and say hi to me when you see me. I'll be, I'm going to be one of those guys that shows up at events with a display table and a handful of brochures and, just kind of, invites people. I've got some amazing pictures from around the world of some of our, it's like, I guess it's like if you had family that you didn't know you had in other places in the world, and somebody came along and said, here's an opportunity to get to know your family. Yeah. Like, wouldn't you want to do that? Like, you've got brothers and sisters and uncles and aunts and grandmas and grandpas in Malawi and in Burundi and in Brazil and in Uzbekistan, wherever, right? Like, why would you not want to get to know those people to the level that you can, which at this point, we haven't really created a platform, but like that would be a longer term goal as well, would be to actually facilitate relationships. And technology allows us to do that now. The prayer meetings are starting to get us there. So like I was on one last Friday with the Japanese MB conference leaders and our missionaries with Multiply in Japan and a bunch of intercessors from North America. And we just spent an hour just praying for God's work in Japan. So those kinds of opportunities will increase going forward. And then, we just imagine a time when there'll be exchange visits where we'll be bringing some of our global leaders to visit churches. Multiply, we kind of do a little bit of that already, but this would be a little bit different because it would be all about relationship, not just raising funds for mission, but also just building those relationships between, so that we can learn from one another and strengthen and connect, strengthen, and expand together.
Yeah, very cool. One of my next questions then is kind of going back to the bigness and the smallness of the world, and also kind of the deep versus wide, deep and wide. One of my next questions is, what's kind of the best way for churches to take another step? Like, for instance, is it good for a church to be kind of minimally involved in like a bunch of countries? Obviously, ICOM is literally around the world, and mission or multiplies around the world. Or is it better for us to kind of focus in on, we love ICOM, we love all of our MB churches, but hey, there's this church in Burundi that we're going to pour into for a while. Like, how do you kind of mix that kind of big picture, but the big picture doesn't really give you the one-on-one connection that some smaller ones do, right? So how can churches kind of balance those things?
Yeah, that's great. So one of the ways that we're helping churches do that from the Multiply side is that we're doing, so I mentioned to you before we came on the call that one of the things that got canceled 2 years ago when I first arrived in Kansas was a workshop, a kingdom workshop, partnership workshop, we call it. So Multiply does these in different regions at different times where we bring together mission committees or, church leadership, mission people from different churches. And we actually talk about how to do partnership in a healthy way, that actually goes beyond what we've sometimes referred to as the transactional model, where we send a check and they send us a story. It's almost like we're buying their stories. Yep. Like how do you actually engage in a more relationship based and that posture of humility that says we need to learn as much as we need to receive as much as we need to give. Mm-hmm. And so we do workshops on that with Multiply, and the workshops will contain sort of an ICOM piece as well, because that's part of the story. So, for example, at the USMB convention in July, Stephen Hummer and I will be presenting a workshop, and probably a few other people, but Stephen and I are kind of taking the lead on it, a workshop on this very topic.
Okay.
So there are opportunities out there to actually learn from the good examples and the mistakes that we have made in the past and that we currently have. But you just make a good point, Matt. I think, there has been a time in history where it was just like, let's just, there's a difference between a shotgun and a sniper rifle. Right. I guess, let's take the shotgun approach. We'll support lots and lots of ministries all over the world for small amounts, but it's virtually impossible to have deep, meaningful relationships using that approach. So what I've found in my own experience is that a lot of churches are reevaluating how they engage globally, and they're saying, yeah, let's actually have a more significant relationship in fewer places, so that it can be a meaningful exchange and not just sending money and supporting projects, but let's actually get to know one another. And so yeah, ICOM wants to help facilitate those kinds of relationships, those kind of partnerships that are more relationally based and less financial exchange.
Yeah, that's good. Because like you said, when it is mostly a North American church sending resources to another church, yeah, I like what you said. We're kind of buying stories.
Yeah.
But like you mentioned, there's so much more that we could be learning from each other, right? Like, it doesn't need to be a just one-time miraculous story that we hear from Thailand once a year. There's so much more that we can do together. So our time's going quick here, Bob. As we kind of start to wrap things up here, I just want to hear more about your, for this new role. Like you said, you're still kind of getting settled, but what's your vision? Like, what do you hope down the road? What do you hope how can things change? How can we grow? What's kind of your big picture? What do you hope comes out of this?
Yeah, thanks. We have some, like that task force that I mentioned earlier actually did come up with some sort of statistical goals, like a percentage of churches engaged, and so that's all great. And I'm fine with all of that. But I think I'm not so much interested in hitting the benchmarks and ticking the boxes as I am actually seeing the real impact that happens and actual real life relationships. So, my intention is to spend the next few years, for as long as the Lord wants me to do it, and as long as, people invite me to do it, actually just encouraging people to think bigger, think globally about what God is doing in the world. Yeah. And like I said, there's a starting point for that, which is, mission. That's one point. Getting information and processing that information, praying through the prayer guide that Multiply puts out and that kind of stuff. But to take it to the next level is that I would like to see is just a deepening of relationships, because I've seen firsthand what a difference it makes. So not every church member, and not even every church leader in North America is going to be able to get onto a plane and fly to an ICOM summit, whether it's a regional summit or a national annual summit. It's just not realistic. But as I said before, with the advance of technology, we can be on a Zoom call or a FaceTime call with churches, leaders halfway around the world, and actually be engaging in relationship. And yeah, of course, there are always going to be challenges. Language will be a challenge. There has to be translation in many cases. Of course, those are not insurmountable challenges. We've been doing these things with this kind of stuff for a long time. So, we can get translation done. We can find the people who can communicate in common languages. Sometimes we don't really even need the translation. We can just be together and experiencing what the other people, we can just join in with what's already happening. And even if it's not translated for us, there's something that happens in the spirit, and there's something that happens in the spiritual realm. Scripture says that God is pleased when brothers and sisters dwell together in unity, in common experience. And so, sometimes we put so much value on understanding everything. Again, that's a Western thing. We have to understand, we have to know everything. It's all about knowledge. but there is this experiential side of the Christian life as well.
Yep.
Some of my most blessed times have been in worship with believers who are singing and worshiping in a language that I don't know.
Yeah.
And yet I am incredibly blessed and recognize the presence of the Holy Spirit in that place, even without understanding every word that's being spoken.
Yep.
So, yeah, my hope is just to see an increase in the sort of fraternal relationships of the family of God. And our family is the MB family. Obviously, we're part of an even bigger family that is, all of God's people everywhere. But there's nothing wrong with knowing who your family are, right? And in our case, we have an identity as Anabaptists, as Mennonite brethren, and it's okay for us to, as long as we don't lift that above, as long as we don't make the MB family bigger than the Jesus family. I think it's perfectly appropriate for us to say, yeah, these are our people, and we share things in common with them in terms of our history and our values and our beliefs. And we're going to get to know our family. We're going to get engaged. And then that leads to mission, right? The last thing, I talked about connecting, strengthening, and expanding. The expanding part is the mission part, right? So we find ourselves engaging more and more in what God is doing in the world as we get into those relationships and figure out how we can contribute to them, they can contribute to us, and that leads to the growth of the church and the spread of the gospel.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think it's a great deal, great idea, great program to expand all of that. Expand, one of your words there. So as you wrap up, Bob, again, I don't want to purchase a story, and I don't mean to put you on the spot, and you've kind of gone around this a little bit already, but as we wrap up, do you have an example or a story of how you've kind of seen this come together? Like how has this practically made a difference, or what kind of things have you seen that you've seen this kind of working?
Which one will I tell? I'll tell a story that I wrote recently. I wrote up, so sorry if it's redundant if you read it somewhere. I think it's going to be in the next Vision for Mission from Multiply. Okay. But I was years ago. I hadn't been in Southeast Asia for very long, but I was with a group of Khmu church planters from Laos, and they were from across the border, but we had them in Thailand at our training center in northern Thailand. We were doing a training event, and Pong Kao, my ministry partner, invited me to speak to this group of leaders. And so I had a whiteboard there, and I drew pictures of the whiteboard. I looked like a Western church with a steeple on it, and then kind of a Khmu, like a bamboo house on stilts with a cross on top. And I said, let's talk about the flow of blessing that has gone back and forth in this partnership, which has gone on for a number of years, because of Pong Kao being from the MB World and the Pacific District Conference, going back and forth. And many people know that story. And so I asked the question to this group of leaders, what are some of the blessings that you have received from the Western, the North American church, from MB Mission? And they started naming things. Oh, you've sent Bibles, and you've sent leaders, and you've sent missionaries, and you've sent resourcing and training, and you've sent funds for us to, build buildings and buy motorcycles. And that's a big long list. And I said, fantastic, that's great. I drew arrows from the West to the Khmu church. Okay. And I said, okay, let's talk about some of the blessings that have gone back the other way. What have you given back? And you know what? Like complete silence. Like they couldn't think of anything immediately. Like they just couldn't think of like what they needed to say. And so I started naming things for them. And I said, hey, your stories, like I said earlier, your stories of courage and faith, your closeness to the Holy Spirit, your tenacity in the face of opposition. Almost all of you have been in and out of jail. Some of you in prison for months. Or even years for your testimony, for your faith in Jesus. And I just started listing these things. And as I did, I could just see like awareness coming on their faces, where they were recognizing for the first time that they actually were a partner in this relationship. They weren't just receiving, they were actually giving. And again, as I said earlier, when you think about what they were giving compared to what we were giving, they're both necessary. But when you think about it in terms of what's valuable in the kingdom of God, the stuff that we were giving, a lot of it was just resources that we have that really didn't even involve a sacrifice for us to give. Right. Whereas what they were giving to us involved huge sacrifices on their behalf at times. And so, I think that to me is an example of what we're aiming for, which is how do we learn, how do we value and appreciate what one another brings to this relationship, so that it's not from the West to the rest, it's not from the wealthy to the poor, it's actually from brothers and sisters to brothers and sisters on, kind of the level playing field of the kingdom of God. And so I think, that'd be a story that still resonates with me. I tell that story quite often because it just reminds me that what I'm doing is important because it's to help us see that reality. Yeah.
And I think part of just the trap of being in our own minds all the time is I think all of us tend to downplay what we have to offer, and we kind of upscale what the other person offers, right? So like for I'll use myself. Like for me, if I tithe, and I know that a portion of my money is going to ICOM missions, I mean, to be frankly honest, like a tithe it's not that much of a sacrifice. Like I've worked my budget so that is possible, right? Like day to day, that doesn't feel like very much of a sacrifice. Maybe I should be giving more, probably should. But on the flip side, some of the people that you're talking to, like when you talk about their faith and their courage and their love, to them, that's just their life, right? Like they're just living how they know how to live, and they're doing church how they know how to do church. And I think we just forget that, oh yeah, this percentage of my income is helping this church. Like day to day, I don't really think about that. And day to day, they're like, oh, you mean my courage is inspiring someone in America? Really? Like, I think we just kind of tend to downplay and forget our strengths and weaknesses. So that's brilliant. I love that.
No, you're exactly right. So that, I think one of the benefits of the ICOM connection is things like that, where we just recognize, what we have matters. Yeah. And God, just like he took loaves and fishes, God can take our what seems insignificant to us, God can take it and multiply it, and use it for the feeding of people spiritually and physically for his glory.
That's awesome. Well, Bob, I love what you're doing. I love what ICOM is doing, and I'm excited to see this thing grow and morph over the years. And you've got some pretty audacious goals ahead of you, so I'm excited to see how those pan out. I'm sure we'll be in touch over the years as those come to fruition. So,
my pleasure. I've really enjoyed talking to you again, Matt. And I just am so grateful for the MB constituency, our churches, our leaders. It just feels like at every turn, I'm being offered an open door to come in and talk about ICOM. And that just tells me that there is a heart to get to know the global family and to be engaged in what God is doing around the world. So that's a huge blessing.
Definitely. That's great. Well, thank you, Bob.
You are invited to join the U.S. Mennonite Brethren family for USMB Gathering 2022 this July in Independence, Missouri, near Kansas City. You will enjoy staying at the Stony Creek Hotel, which is nestled in a small oasis with a lake, waterfall, park, and walking trails. The theme is Increasing Impact, with a focus on evangelism and reaching the lost as we strive to make a real difference for Jesus in our communities, nation, and the world. Make plans now to attend the Biennial National Pastors Conference for Pastors and Spouses, July 26th through the 28th, and the National Convention for Everyone, July 28th through the 30th. Register today at www.usmb.org.
Well, once again, my thanks to Mr. Bob Davis for joining us today, and thank you for listening. I hope you were encouraged by some of the stories that Bob had to share. And just an encouraging reminder that sometimes things that we do here on our side of the world might feel insignificant, but we really are able to be a blessing to other churches on the other side of the globe, and vice versa. It's a good reminder there's so many good things happening around the world. And some of those stories about the courage that Bob was talking about, I just think we need that. And Bob's just so right that we really do need each other to fully experience God, fully experience the kingdom of God, and for us to be most effective at our ministry. So, sometimes I know we have international people listening. So if you're joining us from somewhere other than North America, thank you for listening. And thank you for encouraging our ministry here. And we hope that we're doing the same to you wherever you are listening. Well, I just want to quickly add my own little encouragement to sign up for the USMB convention. I think you just heard a little spot about that. And I just bought my ticket this week. I'm looking forward to being in Kansas City this July for the convention. And I would love to meet you if you're listening today. And if we haven't met, or if you plan to be at the convention, I'd love to get to know some of you who listen. So please do sign up, and I would love to get to meet you here in just a few months when we meet in Kansas City. All right, with that, we'll wrap up this episode 50, and we'll see you next time for episode 51 as we continue our conversations here on the Lead Pods.
Thanks for listening to Lead Pods. Make sure you don't miss an episode by subscribing to our show wherever you're listening today. Learn more by visiting usmb.org, and be sure to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. We'll see you next time as we learn more practical tools to increase our impact together.